sit back and watch the magic unfold. Hi, I'm Steve from 1233D. Today, I have been challenged with a tier list. For those of you who don't know what a tier list is, I have to go through all of the filament types, drag them into the relevant boxes that I deemed fit, and give you my reasons for doing so. I've been given letter grades, S being superb, A being good, B being adequate, C being yeah, if you're in a scrape, D being I don't use it or wouldn't see a use for it. Disclaimer! This is only my personal opinion. So, without further ado, we shall get cracking and jump straight in. First up for me is going to be hips. I'm going to put that in category D because hips isn't really that commonly used much anymore. Basically, hips you can dissolve with a chemical called Filament, which allows you to use hips as a support material. So if, for instance, you were printing a complex ABS part that had very, very intricate supports required, you could print those supports in hips, then put the whole part into Filament to dissolve away the hips filament, leaving you a clean, finished print. With the onset of PVA filaments or whatever else and more multi-material machines on the market, hips isn't really a hugely popular filament anymore, although it still has its uses, do not get me wrong. Next up, people may shoot me for this.
Shoot him in the face!
Shoot me in the face!
But I'm also going to put nylon in the D category. See some of you cringing behind your screens as I do this, but needs must. Nylon, D. Nylon can be a very, very tricky filament to print with. It requires very, very specialist type equipment to the point that you probably would be best recommended to print your nylon filament direct from a very high temp filament dryer directly to your printer. You want something that has as little moisture content as possible when printing with nylon. The environmental issues of printing with nylon can be bewildering, shall we say. I've printed with nylon a couple of times. I've had varying amounts of success with it. Nylon is exceptionally hard and exceptionally good for printing engineering grade products that are strong, durable, chemical, heat resistant. In the firearms industry, a lot of firearms are now manufactured with nylon because it is that hard and durable. So it makes for a very good all-round hard, durable material, but can be very problematic to print with. So that is why I have placed that in D. So I shall proceed. The first one I'm going to put in C is PEEK. PEEK is a exceptionally good engineering grade filament, but does require a specialist type printer. You need a printer capable of reaching exceptionally high temperatures at the hot end and the print bed, and you want a stabilized chamber temperature. Otherwise you will end up with a really, really poor quality print. PEEK is exceptionally expensive. It isn't something that I've really played with. I do have some, so at some point in the future, no doubtly, I will be playing around with PEEK filament. PEEK's used an awful lot in the aerospace industry. They use quite a lot of it for engineering prototypes and whatever else. Even functional parts because it is exceptionally strong as well. Very, very, very heat resistant. Next, so PVA, a soluble support material filament. For those of you who are familiar with PVA bags for fishing, for example, PVA filament is exactly the same sort of principle. It does dissolve in water, but what I would suggest you do prior to just taking your print straight off the print bed and dunk it in a bowl of water and letting it dissolve is you physically remove as much of the PVA support material as you can prior to putting it in water, because it does take quite a while to dissolve and it becomes very, very gummy and gloopy before it actually does dissolve. More of it you remove prior to putting in water, the more successful your finished results will be. So if you remove most of it, you might get left with like supporting face on your print and whatever else. Drop it in water, leave it there to dissolve away, gently agitate it with your finger or a toothbrush or something like that, and it will disappear, leaving you again with a very, very clean print. The beauty of PVA filament is also your support interface distance you can make minimal, because you can literally have the PVA filament touching your finished printed item to give you a really, really clean finish, because you know ultimately you haven't got to pick all that away afterwards, you can dissolve it. It can be a little bit tricky to print with is extremely hygroscopic, and if you haven't dried it out prior to printing with it, you will not have a very good success at all. To store it correctly, dry it before you use it, and dial the settings up for your printer to print with that filament. But once you've done that and you've got it all in there, you can just go ahead and use it whenever you want. I think that is it for D and C. I can't really think of anything else, so it leaves me B, A and S. Probably put PLA silk in B. Now, you may ask why. I don't really print a lot of silk. I've passed that phase in my printing career where I want to print shiny things. It has its use again, certain applications. I mean, we've just completed a light box, which I printed with white PLA silk because it gives it a nice surface finish for a diffuser for a light. That's why I picked it. I wouldn't typically go out and buy or print a lot of silk PLA because I want to print shiny flexes or whatever. If there is a typical application that I want something to be finished in a rich colour that has a nice sheen to it, I will pick silk. If not, it will be another type of filament. So silk is in B. What else would I put with B? I would also put PLA CF in B. Why, may you ask? PLA CF is not strong. It is incredibly brittle. It breaks incredibly easily. The only benefit that you are going to get to adding carbon fibre into PLA is aesthetic looks. I don't care what anybody tells you, carbon fibre in PLA will not result in a stronger print. No way at all. PLA is already very, very brittle. Adding carbon fibre to it just increases the amount the material becomes even more brittle. It's as simple as that. If you print anything out in carbon fibre PLA, you will instantly see when you do a stress test on it that it will break a lot easier than standard PLA will. And that is down to the fact of the fibres and the actual PLA composite. They're both rigid materials. It just makes the part even more brittle once you've finished printing with it. So if you're wanting something that looks aesthetically pleasing, then PLA CF is an absolute winner. So if it's just something that you want to sit on the side and look good, then by all means use it. With it being a matte black finish, it does a really, really good job of hiding layer lines. Great. Next up, PC. I'm also going to put standard PC in category B. Now, PC is polycarbonate. Again, another very, very strong material. The core one that you can see behind me, the door is made of polycarbonate. So it's an incredibly durable, strong material. It can be a little bit finicky when you come to print with it. It needs to be, again, dried thoroughly before you use it, and your print settings are key in getting this filament to print successfully. I have read various reports that some people say over time PC does become incredibly brittle, breaks and cracks. I haven't experienced it, but I have read other people that have encountered these things when they've used it for engineering parts. PC isn't very flexible in terms of elasticity like ABS and ASA are. It's very, very rigid, so any distortion or expansion and contraction could lead to, you know, delamination or cracking of your prints. So just take that into consideration. The caveat to that is my next one, which I am going to stick straight in box A, PCCF. Polycarbonate mixed with carbon fibre. I love it. It prints amazingly. Print finish is superb. The resilience of the parts that are printed with it are excellent, to the point that Prusa have adopted all of their high temp parts are now manufactured with their own PCCF filament. The keys to printing with this filament type is ensure it's dry. If it's been open for a while, make sure you dry it prior to printing with it. And if you want to, you know, alleviate any issues with it, store it in a vat bag or an airtight container when you're not using it, and thoroughly dry it out again before you start to print with it. There is minimal to no warping in my experience. It gives you a nice finish. It's easy to print with, and it just looks very nice, and it produces an exceptionally good engineering grade functional piece. If you're looking for some material types that are going to require to be quite temperature resistant, chemical resistant and whatever else, strong, and you're going to make functional machine pieces out of it, definitely consider using PCCF. And next, I shall put in TPU and TPE into the A group. I love TPU and TPE, again, for their own individual uses. Tyres for RC models, gaskets We've even printed out some rubber washers with TPU. It's a very, very versatile material. Phone cases are another prime example that you'd use TPU or TPE for. Can be slightly problematic if you haven't stored your filament correctly. Make sure that your filament is very, very well dried out, especially if it's been left open for a while. Once you've got your settings dialed in, pretty much all of the default stock settings on most premium slicers nowadays have pretty good profiles already made in for TPU or TPE. The one thing that I will say to you is TPU sticks like God knows what to your print bed. Take that into account. Large surface areas on your build plate will be a pain to peel off. We use a 3D adhesive spray. Don't let the adhesive fool you. It isn't glue. Basically what happens is when the substance becomes hot or warm, it becomes very, very tacky. Once it's cooled down, it acts like a release film. So it will help you to get your prints off the build plate. Once the build plate has fully cooled, it will just wash away. So you won't see any traces of it left behind on your print. Next, I shall... PETG CF is also, I'm going to move that to B, because I don't really use PETG CF a lot. I have used it. It is stronger than PLA CF. But again, I'm a little bit on the fence over it. I know that numerous people use it quite religiously. Michael Badley, he's printed all of his droids out of PETG CF. He openly admitted he doesn't like sanding and he wants to keep sanding to a minimum. So what you find is PETG CF or PETG CF, they require minimal sanding because the carbon fibre content of the filament helps to disguise the layer lines. It works. I have seen the results and it does yield nice results. In terms of overall strength, it will be stronger than standard PETG and it will be noticeably stronger than the PLA CF because PETG has flex in it, so it's got more give in it already, and it will typically hold out a lot better than the PLA equivalent. Next up, gonna put PCTG in B. This is a relatively new filament and we are going to do a video dedicated solely to this filament type. We've played around with it now quite a bit. I'm not going to try and pronounce the full name because it is an absolute tongue twister, but what I can tell you is this filament is very strong. You can get it in transparent colours, you can get it in solid colours. It has a very, very nice sheen to the finished print and it acts very well when you place light behind it. So if you're wanting to make something, I don't know, in a 3D model that's got, for instance, stained glass windows, PCTG would be a prime material to use for that because it is heat resistant, it is chemical resistant, it is tough, it is as easy to print as PLA. It isn't toxic, it doesn't give off any bad fumes or smells, and just provides you with an overall nice quality print. Honestly, it prints just the same as PLA, but gives you better results overall. I will next move on to, it's getting harder and harder. Lightweight PLA, I am going to stick in also B. To me, lightweight PLA only has one use, and that is for RC model aircraft. I don't know what you would use it for outside of that. There's a couple of different variants of it. You've got a pre-foamed lightweight PLA and you've got a foaming PLA. So the pre-foamed one basically prints the same as standard PLA. It is already expanded before it's spooled up. What that means is the filament is full of air, and because as it's gone through a heat process, it's expanded. The other type, it foams as it comes out of the nozzle. So basically the hotter you print the material, the more it will foam up. And what that results in is an incredibly lightweight print, which is ideal for RC aircraft. I'm not going to say strong because it isn't strong. If you printed a wing with it, for instance, that is like vase mode, you would be able to put your finger through it. But that is the nature of it. I mean, going back years and years and years ago when people used to make RC planes out of balsa wood and paper and whatever else, the wings were covered in like a tissue paper, which were really easily, punctured. It is a bit stronger than that, but it's not much stronger than that. And you would need to reinforce certain parts with carbon fibre rods and whatever else to give it rigidity and all that good stuff. But for overall lightweight modelling properties, lightweight PLA is perfecto. You will also notice that when you buy lightweight PLA, it comes in random spool sizes. You've still got the same volume of filament on there. Once you've printed with it, you would probably get over 1 kilogram in equivalent print volume, if that makes sense. Next, we've got one here called Composites. Now, I'm going to stick Composites in B as well, because Composites is quite wide and varied. Typically, every filament type that I've mentioned up to now, with the exception of TPU and TPE, are available in carbon fibre and glass fibre combinations. So what I mean by that is you can buy ASA, CF, ASA, GF, so on, so on, so on. Composites we've put under a broader category, and we'll pretty much cover all of those under that one category. They all have their uses depending on the application that you want to use them for. One company that we supply make a lot of parts for automotive and whatever else, sports cars and whatever. They use a PACF filament, which is, again, and I think it's nylon with carbon fibre. That is extremely high temperature resistant. I mean, they're using the prints that they produce out of this filament under the bonnet on sports cars, which gives you an idea of how high temp it will, you know, withstand. A very, very good material, and it alleviates the need for injection molding. So if you like, you wanted to make a custom airbox for your car, you very easily could do with that type of filament. It's not something that I'd use on a daily basis. That is why I put it in B, but it is still an exceptionally good filament that I do use from time to time in various forms. Next, we shall proceed on to A. I'm going to stick quite a few in one hit and give you the reasons why. So PLA, PLA Pro, Bio PLA, and High Temp Stroke Matte PLA. They are all going in A. Why? I use PLA quite regular, depending on what I'm actually making, and the use case for it will stipulate what kind of PLA I'm going to be using. PLA I will use for rough prototyping, or a sacrificial part, or a jig, or something like that. Something that isn't going to get daily use. It's not going to be exposed to high temperatures, chemicals, water, anything like that. I will print in PLA. And the reason for that is because it prints really quickly, it's very cheap, and it gives you basically a finished part that you can then compare for fit, design changes, whatever else. You're not sacrificing a long print time on a very, very intricate ABS print, for example, when you can just knock it out in PLA, check everything's right, and then once you're happy with it, you can then print the finished part out in your chosen filament type, because you know that everything else is golden and you're good to go. PLA Pro, typically I'll use PLA Pro for engineering type parts, functional parts, cosplay props, that type of thing. Anything that isn't going to be exposed to a lot of heat or moisture, but still requires something to be quite hard and rigid, and a good surface to obviously paint on top of. Bio PLA. Now, this one's a bit of a new one. Bio PLA is basically filled up with biological waste products. I don't mean toxic waste I'm not on about that sort of biological waste. It's basically, as an example, algae. We sell a Bio PLA algae, which is dried out, blended up into a powder, mixed with the PLA. That is where the word bio comes from. Another one we sell is the beer range, which is made out of basically the hops that have been left in the bottom of the vats. They obviously clear all them out, pulp it up into dust, dry it, mix it with PLA. It gives it a pigment, but it's a biological additive, if you like, so it's not a chemical. So it's quite good, has its uses, but it isn't my daily go-to. Then we have quite a new PLA type that has come into the market. It's high temp PLA. We actually have matte PLA. That's why I've put a stroke high temp PLA stroke matte, because our matte PLA is also high temperature. It will withstand temperatures before it starts to deform up to 80 degrees, where typically your standard PLA would start to warp and distort about 60. If you are printing something out and you're adamant on using PLA because that's the only filament you're comfortable with or whatever, then high temp is definitely worth considering, especially if it's going to be something that you leave in your car. When I very first started 3D printing many years ago, I printed the obligatory Iron Man helmet. The faceplate was printed out in standard PLA. As many of you know, the UK, we're not blessed with, you know, blazing hot summers and all of that type of stuff. I'd primed the part, I'd left it out on a piece of cardboard on my lawn in the sun. 10 minutes later, I came back to find all of the outer wall had sunk in between my infill. I wasn't happy, but this is the joy of PLA. So I wouldn't like for anybody to go out and spend a whole lot of money, time, effort, and whatever else to create, I don't know, a full Iron Man suit for him to leave it in the back seat of the car on a warm day to come back to find it's flat. You wouldn't be having a good day. In those instances, you might want to consider high temp PLA, or you could just jump straight to the next one, which is PETG. PETG. I don't know what the fear is with everybody still in this modern day and age about printing with PETG. Honestly, if you can print with PLA, you can print with PETG. The only difference is it's stronger, it's more water resilient, it's more chemical resilient, and it's easier to sand. And it's harder, stronger, more durable. All of the good things that you need. If anybody has already tried in the past, they've printed a helmet out and you're sanding away your PLA helmet, wondering why the hell you're not getting anywhere. PLA just hates being sanded. Even with a random orbital sander with like 80 grit paper on, you're still chewing up the filament. PETG, on the other hand, you can actually generate dust from it when you're sanding it, which is always a good sign that you're actually removing some material. You don't tend to get that so much with PLA. PETG just makes for a really, really decent quality, resilient print. So especially if you are into cosplay or anything like that, please stop printing with PLA. Try some PETG. You will thank me later. Now I'm only left with two. Now the two that I'm left with are really hard because they're both effectively the same filament. So I could cheat and stick them both in S. I'm going to do it. I'm sorry. And anybody can shoot me down. I've done it. S, ABS and ASA. Now, the reason I put both of them there is because technically they are both the same material, albeit one is a slightly hybrid version of the other. ABS is a raw material, typically used for production of your car bumpers, car body mouldings, anything that requires impact resistance, chemical resistance, heat resistance, water resistance, UV resistance, although ABS can be a little bit more temperamental to UV. So for those of you who will have had the old school black plastic bumpers, you'll know over a period of time they start to go grey. That is the UV light, sunlight, basically bleaches the plastic because ABS isn't overall very UV resistant. This was the dawn of ASA. So ASA is a lot more UV resistant than ABS, although it is basically built around ABS with a couple of added chemicals and whatever else to make it a little bit more stable under UV light. It's also less prone to warping, doesn't alleviate warping altogether. There are still factors that you need to take into account when printing with it. But overall, those two materials for me, with modern machinery, printers and whatever, they've all got some form of chamber heating or chamber temperature monitoring, so it makes printing with ABS and ASA a breeze nowadays. The problems that you will start to get with either of those two filament types are uneven cooling, because that is ultimately what warps your print and destroys it and makes it unusable. So provided you can keep everything as level and an even keel as possible while printing with it, it prints perfectly, and the actual print finish on ABS or ASA, in my opinion, is miles better than PLA. You can actually chemically bond it with acetone because the acetone actually melts the two surfaces and actually fuses them together once it's evaporated. You can use acetone to smooth your prints, alleviating the need for sanding. There's just a whole host of things that you can do with ABS and ASA. People nowadays are printing their cosplay props with ABS or ASA because they've noticed the benefits to it in terms of post-processing and finishing. You can get an incredibly smooth finish on ABS once you've wiped it over with some acetone to level out them layer lines, and you get a gloss-like finish once you've actually finished. The only downside to those materials is you will need to print those on an enclosed printer with some form of extraction because the fumes from them aren't nice. They can give you headaches, but there's no harm in leaving a printer printing ABS in your home office. Leave the window open, get some extraction, get some air passing through. That's adequate enough. But you don't want to be in the confines of a boxed off closed room with no ventilation, churning out ABS 24/7. It would not be good for you. I think that really sums it up. It's a tricky one because to me, I've been 3D printing for a long time. I know that material types have their own uses, but I wanted to try and get across some aspects of different filament types, what their uses are, what my suggestions are, and why I would use them. And if any of you, want to counter any of my choices, please do feel free to, challenge me in the comments. You're up for a healthy debate. It's all part of the course. As I said from the beginning, these are my preferences through my use case. Your use case could be very, very different. I think the key takeaway from this video is you should be a little bit clearer now on what these filaments are, what they do, what they're good for. But yeah, I hope you've found this video useful and informative. And if you've got any questions about any of the filaments that I've discussed in this video, please do ask them in the comments box below. We will do our best to answer you as quickly as possible. But yeah, I am going to wrap this one up. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't already, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and if you really want to, share with the world. Bye-bye for now.
As always, we aim to have the most competitive 3D printer prices on the market. If you see any of our printers being sold by a mainstream retailer for less, please drop us an email using the link in the description and we'll do our very best to beat their price. Also, if you're watching from outside the UK, check the description for links to our European 123 3D sister stores.